All right. Hi, I'm Erik Kain. I'm here with Liana Kersner or Liana K. I guess. How do you go these days?
As
Sure.
long as people aren't calling me a word that, now can be said on cable news, but, there's no limits now, but I don't care. It's one of those things where I started getting called red in the third grade. And so I just have a very large collection of street names. So
Yeah.
either up here in Canada, we say Liana, but
Oh, Liana. Yeah.
Americans tend to say Liana. It's funny,
Yeah. I
but
wonder why that
either is
is.
fine.
Yeah, Canada, man, they have all sorts of weird things like the washroom
Yeah.
and serviettes and Zed. You know.
Zed, yeah.
Yeah.
And although apparently this is different from region to region in the US, certain states say pop like we do, others
Uh-huh.
say soda.
hmm Yeah. When I lived in Montana, I think it was pop, but it's
Really?
soda. It's soda down here in Arizona where people talk normal. But no, I lived in Canada for a couple years. I liked it. It was fun.
Which part?
Vancouver.
Oh, yeah. The weather's much nicer out in Vancouver.
Yeah, it's lovely there. There was some pretty good rain, but for the most part, it was pretty ideal.
Yeah, the weather's like a slightly less extreme Seattle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, more balmy. I lived in Seattle for a little while also, but I was like 2 or 3, so
Yeah.
I don't remember living there all that well. But I like the Northwest. It's a nice part of the country. I think it's a little too gray most of the time for me, but I have living in Arizona, you get a lot of sunshine. So
Arizona's beautiful. I love Arizona.
yeah, we finally got our first snow this year. We're up in the mountains, so we get a lot of snow usually. Sometimes we're in the top 10 snowiest places in the U.S. actually.
Mhm.
So, but we got our first snow finally, and by that afternoon, it was already sunny and nice out. So it's like you get the snow, but then it's nice, and you can go outside, and I like that.
Yeah, well, you guys have a lot of cool little microclimates there. I love that about
Yeah.
Arizona.
hmm Yeah, like even down in Tucson, it was basically like a desert town. You can take a drive up into the mountains right next to Tucson and be in ponderosa pine
Yeah.
forests and ski. So
Yeah.
it's pretty nice. But the only thing we're missing is an ocean. So eventually, I hope we get to that point. When
When
California just
climate
goes
change is
under.
possible.
Yeah, I mean we're headed that direction, obviously. So.
This is not
uh,
fast.
so how have you been? It's been a while since our last little podcast.
Yeah, it's been
Couple
really
years, I
busy
think.
because I believe since the last one, Lady Bits launched.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how's that been going?
Surprisingly positive, and I know that sounds kind of bleak and dire, but it's true. I was expecting, because of some of the stereotypes of the gaming industry and all the conventional wisdom, I expected there to be a lot more hostility, and there's been next to none. I mean, you always get the haters who just like to find something wrong with everything, but on the whole, people have been very receptive. It seems the bigger the swing I take, instead of it, in terms of like defining new terms for gaming, and the deeper, the more granular I get, the more people like it, which has been a really not completely a surprise. It confirmed a theory I had that gamers are essentially decent people who just want somebody who actually believes what they're saying and puts games first, and they don't really care what the topic is or how you approach it, as long as you seem to, first of all, legitimately enjoy video games, and second of all, seem to know what you're talking about. And I always believed that, but this was a test of it. And with the narrative that's out there right now of gamers being horrible, disgusting little troglodytes to women, there was always a part of me that wondered. And the more it goes, the more I'm glad I was right in what I believed, but it's nice to finally have evidence that look, see, you can do this and not have everybody go crazy.
Yeah. Well, and I think also approaching topics with a level of nuance and respect, it sort of, there's a confirmation bias, or not a confirmation bias, but like a selection bias, in that the people who want that kind of conversation or that dialogue are going to be attracted to that. So you do draw a certain audience based on what you're putting out there. And I think people who scream a lot or come at it with very aggressive, they're going to draw the more aggressive, screechy types as well.
Yeah, well, I do my best to filter out hate watchers.
Right.
So, I mean, that less traffic, but better quality traffic. And it seems
Yeah.
that the way internet stuff is going. I mean, nuance, I have found nuance is a double edged sword. I try to start from established, established definitions, established sort of, I hate to say doctrine, but some people use definitions and things like that as doctrine. But I try to start there. And that's been the only real stumbling blocks with Lady Bits is when you try to say, well, here's the accepted definition of sexism and here's the accepted methodology with it. Some people got hung up on that and missed the fact that I'm saying, here's what it is. Here's sort of the things that make this kind of messy. Here's my alternative. So, I mean, it hasn't all been roses, but that's a communication thing as well. Figuring out how to do it better is also something that I'm hoping is a positive outcome of this experiment, because if people can see it can be done and we can figure out what works, then it can be replicated. And that's another thing I'm really, really hopeful for, is as soon as we find what works, it's easier to just do that again than stumble around figuring out, the secret sauce.
Yeah. I remember when we first talked about this, you hadn't launched Lady Bits yet, but you were trying to get some press for it, some attention for it, and you're having a hard time with that with traditional gaming press. How's that been going now? Like, has there been any sort of movement in that, or is it still just the same? The battle lines have been drawn, and been drawn.
You know how it is in the media business. Nobody actually says no, and they just keep pushing you off, and eventually you realize they're actually saying no. And when one prominent male member of the games press says they couldn't cover me right now because, my videos are really long and they don't have time to watch it because they have to take care of their kids. It was just a moment, because it's a show about women's issues in gaming. And I mean, a huge issue for women is that, there's the whole thing of women on the mommy track held back in the workforce because of kids and work-life balance and all that stuff. So the fact that a prominent male ally was using that excuse, I find it very amusing to this day.
Yeah.
And
I mean, because you do have to. I mean, I have kids, so I sometimes do have to take care of them. But there are times when you don't as well. So,
well, also the idea that you can't watch 2 half-hour videos because of childcare. Welcome to being a woman, men of the games press. This has been our lot in our working life. I mean, I don't have kids, but I see women who do and go back to work really struggle. And then women who don't go back to work face the stigma of being a stay-at-home mom. And I find that horribly unfair, because scheduling is an issue for everybody. When you have, multiple little lives who depend on you, and that's your priority, and it should be your priority, it just makes it that much more challenging. And I think, it's so typical of the gaming industry, where someone will take a good idea and use it as an excuse, as opposed to taking a good idea and using it as a foundation to build better. And it was just so, it was just such a moment. And it actually, in a weird way, having that experience, it was kind of motivating, because sometimes it's good to know you're not paranoid. I started humming Kurt Cobain lyrics, just because you're paranoid don't mean they're not after you.
Yeah.
It's nice to know that when I do have a negative belief about something, it's true as well, because I don't like cutting myself off at the knees, but you have to put your energy where it's going to be the most productive. And so I'm appreciative of, people like you, of some of the smaller, more independent sites, some, freelancers for the Huffington Post and things like that, who have given this series coverage. with social media right now, fortunately, you can go direct to a potential audience. When I started in television, it wasn't like that. You were
Yeah.
really reliant on legacy media to get your message out there. Now, a lot more people read legacy media back then, so it's a double-edged sword. But it's nice to not have to go through that press gauntlet, because I admit that's one of my least favorite parts of the job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and really, you have to. I mean, you sort of almost have to be extreme about everything if you're going to go through the media. Like to even get like a very popular YouTuber to any press, they're going to have to be controversial in some way.
Right.
You
Right.
know, and that's, there's a lot of factors there. There's just so much stuff to cover these days. I mean, between games and there are just so many new content creators out there, and so it is tricky. But it does seem that the noisiest, most controversial people always sort of rise to the top. And if you're doing something a little more interesting or a little less divisive, then that's going to be difficult.
Yeah, and it's funny because some of the things I've done have been, I was thinking, oh wow, this is a big swing. Defending Grand Theft Auto from a feminist perspective is not the
Yeah.
most mainstream opinion, but it's almost like you have to not just be controversial but outright stupid to get
Yeah.
press attention these days, because you have to start a conversation, which means do or say something quasi or completely idiotic so everybody can yell at each other, and I have no interest in doing that. I think the quality of what you do matters and should matter more. I know how the game is played because I've been on the other side, not just in gaming, but in music programming on television and then news talk radio. So I know the game, but I also know that if these bigger sites wanted to have a mandate to actually promote projects in general, not just women's projects, but everybody's projects, they could. They're
Sure.
chasing
Yeah.
clicks based on controversy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, it's a vicious cycle. I will say, from my experience, that sometimes you can do pretty innocuous things and get lots of controversy out of it.
Yeah, you
Because
have some experience with
I
that.
found out the hard way, I guess you could say, with my very very mild tweet about Steve Bannon and Gamergate. But hey, apparently now I'm the founder of the alt-right and also have been chased offline and numerous other things about me that I never knew. So. Some
And you were referring to a 4-month-old comment as well, like an
Yeah.
article in USA Today from 4 months ago. It was,
Right.
I've had that I say something that I think is just sort of established fact, but in this day and age, established facts are kind of the most controversial thing you can say.
Right.
I personally thought that was ridiculous. First
Oh,
of all, you
yeah.
can't be the founder of the alt-right. Everybody knows that Pepe the Frog is the founder of the alt-right. Back, what was it, 6,000 years ago in Kekistan? But yeah,
Yeah.
but
At the
it's
dawn of
just
time.
this is why things are such a mess right now,
Yeah, yeah.
that people can't uh, make an objective comment without people. It's almost like people try to be mind readers, and the issue is not what you said, it's the potential thought crime behind the statement.
Yeah.
And as somebody who
Yeah.
studied dystopian fiction back in my student days, that completely freaks me out, because I argued that Huxley was the true dystopia that would come to pass, not George
Mhm.
Orwell. But we certainly seem to be living in an Orwell meets Kafka kind of age.
I think there's a little Huxley in there too, though. I think it's a weird like amalgam of all of these different dystopias coming together.
Yeah, I guess there is some Huxley, because everybody tries to throw pseudoscience at the wall as well.
Well, sure, and we're always sort of bombarded by entertainment and
Yeah, Soma.
the
Yeah.
distraction, that whole as well as definitely a couple minutes of the 2 minutes hate. Like it's a weird. They're also prescient, these writers. I don't know.
And it's funny because those writers weren't writing about the future. They were writing about
Right.
their own past experiences with fiction. Like Orwell, it was experiences in the Spanish Civil War. Huxley was, I believe it was his great grandfather or grandfather who was a contemporary of Charles Darwin's. and he was sort of writing about the kind of pitfalls of oh, let's make evolution explain everything.
Hmm.
Not to say I don't believe in the theory of evolution, but the eugenics movement was starting to
Hmm.
rise at that point. And I mean, Kafka was writing about his experiences as a government clerk.
Yeah.
It's all rather interesting that these wonderful minds took the mundane and turned it into something we consider prophetic, but we only consider it prophetic because history repeats itself.
Oh, and because they were very observant,
Yeah.
like they were all looking at things through a lens of like, this is where things could go for us also. It's like, maybe Orwell had seen some of uh, the tyrannical regimes of his day, and then he sort of imprinted that onto Great Britain. But he was definitely, I mean, they were all definitely sort of an eye to the future based on what was happening then. I mean, that is what all the best science fiction and dystopian fiction comes from.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
and but no one anticipated Twitter, and the fact that it's so dominant in our culture now.
There's
Like,
a few things in Philip K. Dick I could say kind of
yeah,
hit Twitter.
okay,
The sort of pithiness of
yeah,
the things he examined. There's little things about it. I think that ever since TV became the dominant medium, there's been this sort of hand wringing about attention spans and all that
sure,
stuff. I actually think Twitter. If you can get good at Twitter, I think you can write anything, because conservation of language is such a difficult skill to learn. I used to write comic books to practice my conservation of language because you have to fit the dialogue in a word balloon.
yeah,
But Twitter is actually better than that because it makes you make your point. And I actually think Twitter, if used effectively, could make some of us long form people much better writers. I think
sure, yeah.
Twitter gets a bad rap just because they've been so you get the feeling that they're constantly taking on water and something's on fire and Scotty somewhere is yelling, I just can't do it, Captain. That's it. Just people feel weakness in the Twitter board and so they pounce.
Well, and there have been some nice moments on Twitter lately. The Sarah Silverman exchange. Did you see that? Where the
Yeah.
guy called her a bad name, and then she just kind of responded without like, not like an asshole, and
Yeah.
reached out to him. I thought that was really nice. Like, it just shows that like there's always more to the story than just somebody being a jerk online. Like, everyone
Yeah.
has their own story. Everyone has something motivating them, even when they're being assholes. Like, there is something going on there. That's hard to
Yeah.
do, though.
I have found that too. And I think that you can really do some good if you try to reach past the asshole,
Yeah,
if that makes any sense.
it's an interesting image.
Yeah, well, yeah, I've been playing a lot of South Park: The Fractured But Whole right now, so perhaps that's influencing my metaphors. But yeah, if you kind of recognize that what a lot of people would dismiss as hate is coming at you, then underneath that there's a rather large, uh, you know, uh, sliver of pain
Yeah.
that someone is trying to talk to, and you have to set limits because you can't invite people to just use you as a garbage dump and free
Mhm.
therapy. But if you can sort of reach past that initial blah, um, you can actually have some really great discussions. I'm glad that Twitter doesn't silo us all off based on
Yeah,
algorithms the way Facebook does. It's nice that it's
definitely.
kind of open, and for all the talk of Twitter being awful and toxic, the moments happen on Twitter, the moments happen on Instagram. You don't hear of some major movement starting on Snapchat. It just Twitter has power. Instagram, even though it's owned by Facebook, these are mediums because they're quickly consumed and very digestible. They, you can do either wonderful good or not so great stuff on
Hmm.
those platforms. I think people dismiss them a little too quickly.
Well, yeah, and I think it's just a reflection of human nature and just the nature of the internet, especially because it's so, the interaction people have when they're speaking to one another or when they're face to face with one another is so different than typing out some lines on a screen. The way people speak to each other in person is rarely so aggressive and hostile because there's that threat of getting punched in the face, for
Right.
instance, and there's embarrassment involved in it, and there's people who are perfectly polite in real life and then go and act like pricks to people online because of that cushion. But that's not necessarily the fault of Twitter. I mean,
Yeah.
Twitter is very useful. I mean, I can, for me personally, it's like I think I've for the last maybe year or two have just had such a short fuse when it comes to people online. Like I'm just ready to be attacked all the time. So then I just lash back out. And I'm trying this year as one of my sort of goals in 2018 is to be more patient or just not engage. It's so hard for me just to not engage, but I think sometimes the best thing you can do is just ignore it, and not say something like snarky or dismissive back, and that's
Yes.
hard for me. I have a hard time like controlling my little micro temper
Yeah.
with people online.
Well, it's the why are you doing this? I mean, my bad habit on Twitter is I have a tendency to make jokes about a lot of things. I have a comedy background. It's just the jokes flow. And so I'll respond to something just because it's too good a lie not to say. And people think it's a serious and heartfelt expression of what I feel instead of just
Yeah.
something I thought was entertaining at the time. And people, accuse me of being a troll or this, that, and the next thing. And it's like just refusing to take everything completely seriously is not trolling people. But there's a lot of things I think culturally we have to sort out because all this stuff is so new. I personally don't think there's anything wrong with being authentic that people are pissing you off. People say that, oh, that makes you a target, blah, blah, blah. It all depends, right?
Yeah.
If it's so funny that we've spent ever since, second wave feminism going, don't tone police me. And now, you're not allowed to have a legitimate response to anything ever. The whole point of being against tone policing is you're supposed to focus on the content of what people are saying. Unfortunately, when people say, don't tone police me, they're often just not able to defend the substance of their argument as well as the fact that they're not being especially nice about it. But I think that, and this is, a lot of people I'm sure will disagree with me, I think social media will eventually make us better people because part of the reason you don't say some of these things when you're right in front of somebody is that you see when something wounds a person. And, our brains are wired with mirror neurons. When we see somebody hurt, we hurt.
Yeah.
And I think eventually we will extrapolate that. I know I've already started to do this. When you feel someone is really hurting, you respond to that. We're going to get better with those empathy through text cues. And empathy's in very short supply these days. And I don't believe that's because of social media. I believe that's because of larger socioeconomic conditions, specifically wage stagnation, that have made us lacking in empathy. It's the Maslow's hierarchy of needs thing, that until those basic, needs are met, you don't tend to connect to the loftier things.
Yeah. No, I think empathy is such a huge part of all of this.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a tricky thing to figure out. I mean, I think it is to do with larger socioeconomic things. I think it's also to do with people consuming the wrong kind of media all the time, like not investing in reading books and spending their days watching the news instead. Things like that. I think just they leave people sort of empty. And I don't know. I mean, I wonder what it's like to live in a perpetual state of anger, to be so upset all the time with the world. And I can't, it's hard to even empathize with that because it's just such a foreign way of being to me. I don't know.
Well, it's exhausting, but I think a lot of people are living in a perpetual state of anger because the alternative is a perpetual state of fear.
Right. Oh, yeah.
I know I had to just get over, and it's weird. You become so afraid at some point that it's like you can't do it anymore. It just exhausts you, and you let it go. And that's part of growing up. And once you hit that, it's really powerful, because then you're like, well, what's the worst that can happen? Well, that's not that bad. On we go.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But I don't think a lot of, especially young people, and young mentally people, they never hit that point.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting just to look at the wider culture through the lens of empathy, because when we had the whole a lot of people couldn't understand Trump winning, and we had the whole basket of deplorables comment and everything. And while I do think there are some deplorables out there, I think that if you look at it kind of with a more empathetic view, you see that there are a lot of people who are just, like you said, they live in fear. Their lives have been upended by the march of time. There's nothing we can really do we can't set that back. But there's a lot of people that don't want just the status quo anymore. They want answers. They want things to be better. And as crazy as it may be to turn to Donald Trump for that, like, I can understand why people did. And then like, people online who are angry over things that seem so frivolous, like video games, or so worked up about this. Well, it is, video games provide meaning in people's lives, and without meaning in our lives, then again, you're sort of staring into the void. And
yeah, well,
so you have to kind of look at this through more than just like brushing people off. And I think that's why so many people do get angry with people in the media, not just the games media, but overall, because they can be so arrogant and dismissive of the plebes,
Yeah, well,
like,
people say about video games that it's something we can hope to control. These larger geopolitical things we don't have any influence over, but this we might be able to do something about. And I think of that, it's like, oh wow, geez, I have to remind myself that some people do feel that small.
Yeah.
And that I wish there's probably something we can do about that. I just don't know what that is. I think we have to make people feel like they can do something about the world around them. And there's just so many people who think the only way forward is to burn it all down.
Yeah.
I think because people don't read, and they read news and they read websites and things like that, but that's all the hot takes of the day. It's not looking at stuff in a larger historical context. And, when things get burned all down, it happened in England, it happened in Greece, it happened in, the Arab world. When it burns all down, there's a sustained dark age after that, and regular people do not do terribly well in those environments. But I think history is the most neglected subject out there right now. We're pushing everybody into the sciences and computer science and learn to code and mathematics and
STEM,
and all.
everything's STEM.
We need certain cultural custodians that can put it in context. That's really what's lacking in terms of our public discourse. People's eyes glaze over in media when you're in meetings, when you mention something that happened more than 6 months ago.
Yeah. Oh, I know. And then everyone's an expert of the moment too, which is just baffling to me. Like any little international crisis, well, the same few people that were talking about the last one, suddenly they're talking about this one too, as though they're like just steeped in all the knowledge of the world, but can never actually provide any context about any of it.
Then you'll watch one show, and then somebody on the next show will show up and either say something completely different or repeat the exact same thing with the exact same words, and you immediately think, somebody's camp sent out a talking point.
Right.
And I think that if people, were demanding digital media literacy from people without giving them the tools. In order to understand digital media literacy, you have to understand how these systems work. And I've been fortunate enough to work in a politicized newsroom. Like, we were the big liberals on a conservative talk radio station. So I was plunged, head first into how conservative talk radio works. And it's fascinating, the weird sort of internal logic that happens in that ecosystem.
Well, continue. I'm
Oh,
curious.
okay. Sorry.
Sorry, I thought you were going to keep going with how that worked.
I wasn't sure anybody cared, but okay.
That doesn't matter. We don't care if anybody cares.
I'm really impressed. I can still inspire a profound silence. Okay, great. So what happens is you go in and your producer has assembled the clippings of the day. And they never quite tell you what to talk about, but they certainly hint very strongly. And it's based on the discussions they've had with the other producers, who, of course, have all been in there since 5 o'clock in the morning. And they've already talked it to death. And so they've already sort of worked out, okay, you're going to do this and you're going to do this and you're going to do this. And at the station I worked at, they didn't like a topic covered. Oh, how times have changed. What a cuddly place I lived in. They didn't like the same topic talked about back-to-back hours. But you couldn't do, and this is what's so brilliant about Fox News, they nailed this formula. You couldn't do scary stuff all the time because people would just turn off their radios. Conservative people tend to be quite blue collar, quite working class. They need to function. They self-medicate a lot. And so you have to really temper the scary stuff with precisely those things we were just talking about, those things that people can understand that really don't matter. But it's almost comforting to freak out about the stuff that doesn't matter. And I remember the either high or low watermark in my talk radio career was a story about backyard chickens. That they were trying to change the guide laws in the city of Toronto to allow people to have backyard chickens. And there was a for and against. And I remember the meeting. It was like, oh, I don't care about backyard chickens. People could do what they want. But somebody had to take the for and somebody had to take the against position on backyard chickens. And it was decided that I would take the I'm against backyard chickens debate club position. And so I had to figure out how to defend not having backyard chickens. And so, of course, you take they poop all over the place and it brings mice and it's disgusting. And who's going to clean up the chicken poop? And they're noisy. And people were furious at me. Furious. They wanted their backyard chickens. We milked this story for 3 consecutive days and it meant nothing.
Yeah.
But it meant people got to talk about something that wasn't something that could cause them to lose their job.
Right.
And for all the complaints about Bill O'Reilly and Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson and Rush Limbaugh, if you don't just watch the hot take clips, if you actually sit down and watch Fox News, they are masters of knowing precisely when to go to the puff piece so their audience feels good.
Yeah.
That is why Fox News is so highly rated, because you can actually pepper your coverage with stories that humble working class people with little more, if you're lucky, than a high school education can actually have an opinion on. Because the whole point of this format is not just to generate listeners, it's to generate callers. And people call in when they're mad at you. Yeah. Good training for the internet, I'll tell you that.
So what you're saying though is like basically the 2 minutes hate only works if you've got something to take the edge off afterwards.
Yes, because people don't listen to things that constantly exhaust them. That is the mistake CNN is making right now. You watch CNN, it's exhausting. I can't deal. They finally got MSNBC available in Canada. And the minute it came, my husband and I signed up because, man, you watch. I can't do an hour of CNN anymore. I'm tired, man. I mean, that's what everybody drags Don Lemon. But he'll do a bit. Well, he'll get Norman Lear on there and he'll sing the All in the Family theme, and Don Lemon will do the Edith Bunker parts. I mean, that retains your viewing audience. That's what you have to do. That's why Howard Stern, people who love him listen for 2 hours, people who hate him listen for 4, because he understands dynamics, he understands pacing, and that's why people have to realize news is produced, and I think that internet media, the clickbait media this is what BuzzFeed does amazingly well, right? I can't take BuzzFeed seriously as a news source because I go to BuzzFeed for top 10 cats in plastic bags, right?
Right.
But that's what gets people coming back to BuzzFeed.
Yeah.
Those are the links. And then they publish the Trump dossier and throw the world into chaos. It's the same model.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't really watch TV news at all. I listen to NPR a lot. That's the kind of the news I consume, I guess. Well, and then the internet.
Yeah, I watch MSNBC just because they do things live.
Yeah.
They cover things live, and because I know I'm going to get hit with it, because if you cover the stuff I cover in games, any sort of social issues, you're going to get pulled into the daily hot take. And I don't want to have to take dedicated time to read. So I leave the news on while I'm editing. And the nice thing about actually seeing the stuff happen live is you don't get pulled into that tangle of misquotations. Like the basket of deplorables comment you mentioned, the narrative that ended up sticking on that was precisely the opposite point that she was trying to make.
Yeah.
And that's politics, but it still means that, it was the exact opposite point. She was attempting empathy there, but it blew up. And the big problem with the Clinton campaign is her surrogates, the people who are supposed to go on there and defend her tooth and nail, didn't.
Yeah.
It was a bad campaign. I really believe in politics. There is no such thing as a bad candidate. That's what you always hear after somebody loses an election. Mitt Romney was a bad candidate. John McCain, well, he picked a bad running mate. None of this matters. It's all about how the candidate is packaged. Yeah. And Donald Trump's people packaged their candidate better than Hillary Clinton's people did.
Mm-hmm.
And my 2 rules of politics, and I said this in a video when this last, the US election in 2016 started. I said, here's my 2 rules of politics. The person who makes the election an examination of their opponent wins. And the person who can summarize their platform in the fewest words wins. And I said this like right at the beginning of the general election. And I'm like, I'm doing this, guys, so we can test it at the end. And sure enough, the election became a discussion of how you feel about Hillary Clinton's emails. Trump won. Trump managed to summarize his entire platform in Make America Great Again. 4 words. Barack Obama still holds the record with hope and change. That's 3 words. But the person who summarizes their platform in the smallest number of words wins, because attention spans are so short. You have to capture those low information voters. And the Clinton campaign just didn't. That I'm with her slogan was terrible. It was awful. Nobody wants to be with the candidate. They want to feel like the candidate's with them. It was a massive mistake.
Yeah, that was pretty bad.
Yeah.
It's just as a series of huge mistakes and blunders that it's almost unbelievable for someone who's been in politics that long.
Well, those are campaigns. Campaigns tend to be, if you look at, Barack Obama's campaigns, there was the whole Jeremiah Wright thing, and any single scandal can kill a candidate. It's all about how they respond to it.
Right. And
the problem, I really get the sense that Hillary Clinton's people did not like their candidate. And if anybody's thinking of running for politics, if you feel like your team does not like you, does not believe in you, doesn't matter how good they are on paper, get rid of them. They're a bad fit. The thing that Trump had going for him is everybody was 100% on board for various reasons, most of them not good, but every single person behind the scenes or out there working for him was 100% on board.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
they all
he's like
wanted
almost
something.
And he's almost impervious to the normal sorts of things that can bog down candidates. It's really remarkable in a way. He's got this way about him. I don't know. It's almost hard to describe, but it's just like the normal. I mean, sometimes he'll go on Twitter and he'll be enormously childish. And you think, how did this man win the election? But then you see him in debates with the other Republicans, and it's like, whenever they try to hit him, it just slides right off.
Well,
There
I
is.
think I think most the two major party platforms right now are fairy dust and nonsense anyway. But I mean, it's less surprising to us up here because we lived through Rob Ford as mayor of Toronto.
Yeah. Oh, I
And it's
remember hearing
very,
about
very, very similar. And poor Daniel Dale, he's a Toronto Star columnist who went down and covered Donald Trump, and he ended up getting some traction down in the US because he just keeps track of Trump's lies.
Yeah.
But before that, he was pretty much assaulted by Rob Ford because he was standing on the other side of the property line to Rob Ford's house taking pictures of a vacant lot that Rob Ford at the time was trying to buy. And Rob Ford, among his other, illustrious resume items, was a high school football coach. And apparently he just charged this poor reporter. Daniel's not very big, but he charged this poor guy linebacker style. And it was crazy. But people, because there's so little authenticity in the media overall, people see that sort of buffoonish and, quite frankly, scary behavior as somehow more real. And so they feel like at least they know the person, even if they don't agree with them. I had to interview Rob Ford twice, and same thing. He lies badly, and he just doesn't care. And after a while, people are just like, that's who he is. He lies. And because a lot of people believe now, because they read some article somewhere or binge watched the show House, they believe everybody lies. And to an extent, that's true. But there's lies, and then there's lies. Trump just lies. Rob Ford just lies. But there's so many disillusioned people out there who believe that is pretty much what everybody does. They feel like these guys are more real because they're not trying to hide it. And that's scary. I mean, I understand the pull of that thinking.
Well, it's certainly with politics, especially like the politicians really do lie a lot, and the established political groups that have been running the country, either Republican or Democrat, they have been lying. I mean, look at the Iraq War, and then the surveillance, all this. There's been so many lies and so much failure to really follow through with promises. Like nobody went to jail for the collapse of the banks and the economic crash in 2008.
Yeah.
All these, we're just so accustomed, especially to the political class lying, that I think you're right. There's a refreshing, it's almost a parody of the system when you see someone like Trump who does it so brazenly, but in almost a more relatable way than the kind of, and then you hear things like, with this new, with the Michael Wolff book, Fire and Fury, one of the observations he makes is that the Trump White House is actually less secretive and more open to the press than the Obama administration was.
Yes.
And it doesn't seem that way on the surface, but then, you read articles about journalists who were targeted rather horrifically by the Obama administration. And so, it's like, I think that one of the attractive points for Trump is that it's all right. However much he is a complete liar and who knows what else is going on with him, it's all right there on the surface.
Yeah.
What you see is what you get.
People like villains because villains will never disappoint them. No matter
Yeah.
how horrible a villain is, he will never disappoint you. Keep in mind as well, a guy like Trump is very, 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 very good for the mainstream news business.
Oh yeah.
Rob
Fantastic.
Ford was the same way. There was a hiring spree in newsrooms
Yeah.
in Toronto, and of course, legacy media is in a lot of trouble right now. Trump's been great for the New York Times. He's been great for the Washington Post, and despite themselves, you saw this with the campaign. As
Oh yeah.
much as they claimed to dislike Trump, they ran his speeches in their entirety over and over and over again. They barely covered Hillary Clinton. And people complain about what happened to Bernie Sanders. It was the same thing. Bernie does the same speech over and over and over again. And it's a wonderful speech if you're in that room. The problem is that the news media, and I know this because I've worked in it, they will only cover a speech if they think there's going to be something new. If you do your same stump speech boilerplate over and over and over again, there's nothing more to say.
Yeah.
Bernie even does his stump speech when he goes on cable news. He just says the same thing over and over again. It wasn't that they were biased against Bernie Sanders. It's that he's been in politics a long time, and he has not adjusted to the fact that if you want the media to cover you in this day and age, you got to change it up. They only cover what's new. And Trump actually benefited from being terribly undisciplined because there was always a new bombshell, right? That's the game. They don't want to run the same stump speech, and it's not because they're bored. They believe that people will just tune out if it's same old, same old. With Trump, you there was a very high chance that someone in the crowd would get beat up. It was news.
Yeah.
The emphasis on the word news is new.
Yeah.
And the Democratic Party needs to adjust to this. They need people who are newsmakers. They need people who are going to go out. A stand-up comic would be terrible in a presidential bid. An improv comic would be amazing because a stand-up comic goes out there and does their 3 7 15-minute set, and it's the same mostly. An improv comic gives you something new based on prompts, and that's what Trump does. He just feeds off the audience, responds to prompts, and he makes news.
Well, the last two successful Democrats were very charismatic.
Yes. Well, they
Bill
were
Clinton
portrayed as charismatic. I'm not the biggest Obama fan.
Well, no, I have lots of complaints with Obama, but he's well-spoken and he's presidential. And
whatever that means.
You're right. I know. But and then of course, Bill Clinton was very good on the fly.
Clinton, I acknowledge. See, I like the swag Obama. The guy who went there when it was smaller groups and he was kind of more himself. And he sort of, threw shade and talked a bit more like kind of your neighborhood preacher kind of thing. The Obama you tended to see in those big rallies, I did not like at all. And Clinton was always Clinton. And there's a great many Bill Clintons. He's a very fragmented person. He's, good. They say good presidents are able to compartmentalize.
Yeah.
That's what Clinton had. There were a lot of different Bill Clintons, so he could always be an authentic Bill Clinton wherever he went. I mean, Clinton and Obama are both very smart people. I will absolutely give them that. I think Obama's biggest weakness is he didn't know when to get angry. And so people felt like he was out of touch.
Yeah.
And so they kind of felt they liked him. They recognized that he was a great man, that he was all the things you said. He was eloquent and excelled in oratory, but they didn't think he cared because they never saw him get angry. And, obviously that's because his handlers were terrified of the angry black man stereotype. Yeah. But it allowed his opposition to paint him as out of touch. And that's the problem with worrying over much about stereotypes. If you're trying to oppose a stereotype with every fiber of your being, you are still being controlled by it. And that's the problem with getting women elected as well. No matter what, you're either going to have to, be a stereotype or work your butt off to unnaturally, oppose a stereotype. Either way, you're not being your authentic self. You're being push-pulled by social expectations.
And do you feel that way, sort of steering back towards your project? How do you deal with that yourself in your show, on your videos, in how you approach your work?
It's funny because the thing I'm least comfortable with is the visual elements of video, which is so weird because I've had a career in television. But I'm very confident with the work. I'm very confident with the ideas, but I need, and I think it's because I had a theater background and actually, build your character kind of thing. But the appearance of a character is super important to me because obviously what people are looking at informs what you're saying. And so on the late night show, it was club wear. It was 11:30 at night. People were usually drunk when they watched. This was our old late night show, Ed and Red's Night Party, back in the day on Canada. It was down on G4 TV on the US, on US TV. So it was very high heels and, club wear, and they wouldn't let me wear giant earrings because they made noise. But for this one, I went very old school, retro 1950s feminine, because it's exactly the opposite of what people expect from feminist content. And I happen to like it. I'm a former pinup model. That is my big video game claim to fame, is I was one of the bomber girls on the art on the side of the planes and the boats and all that stuff in a game called Battle Stations Pacific. And so it's my thing. It's authentic to me, and I'm not adopting a uniform. It's certainly a costume. And then, of course, when you get into versus mode, they're all over the place. I mean, chainmail bikinis and PVC bustiers, and then plaid gingham, not plaid shirts, and full blown thief armor with a cowl and everything like that. That's what people play video games for, is that pageantry. And I really think that if you're not embracing the pageantry of the medium, people are going to kind of feel like you're glancing off of it instead of embracing it. So I kind of chose to marinate myself in the whole process. I was going to do flat out cosplay initially, and then I worried that I might get slapped with content IDs. So I do costumes that are evocative of certain types of characters instead of being the characters themselves. But that's sort of the thinking behind the wardrobe. The whole color scheme for Lady Bits is the whole set and main wardrobe points in the main shot are colors that complement the color pink without it in containing the color pink. I thought that was sort of an interesting way to look feminine, because my big complaint with modern feminism is it claims to be trying to advance women without embracing things that are feminine. How do you promote womanhood without showing the feminine? It doesn't make any sense to me. And there's this whole accepted wing of academic feminism that feels the same way I do, that it studies the feminine and what that means and how that's performed, as well as we need more women in the workforce or we need more women in the boardroom. It doesn't break containment from academia. Only, as we were talking about before, the really crazy stuff that's stupid and controversial, that's the stuff that makes the news. And so that's the opinion that people have of what all of feminism is. Right. And it's not accurate. I would say it's definitely less than half of academic feminism. I would suspect it's even smaller. I don't want to add, I don't want to assign a number because then people go and tear it apart. But it is a minority. And it's a minority because the minute any of that stuff is held up to peer review, it gets shredded. Right. These symposiums and conferences and everything like that came up in the whole dreaded Gamergate controversy and continue to be a thorn in the side of women's advancement. Those are private conferences organized with the sole purpose of skirting the traditional peer review process. So what ends up getting featured there? Junk.
Yeah.
That goes all the way back to the feminist sex wars and the incident at Bernard College. I mean, it all goes, I call it the Dwork side because it goes all the way back to Andrea Dworkin. They knew that if they could take over the megaphone, if they could grab the mic, they didn't need to win hearts and minds because it didn't matter what the hearts and minds were doing. Nobody could hear them.
Yeah.
And that's a major problem with what's going on today, that things like, girls dying from menstruation taboos in Nepal and the horrible rape crisis in India, and even some of the things that are happening to girls right in North America. I mean, our indigenous communities in Canada with their missing and murdered Aboriginal women issue. Yeah. And then some of the stuff that happens to girls in poverty in America. These are serious, serious, serious issues. Right? They affect women in specific ways that need specific solutions. And we're not addressing those because we're arguing about the costume of a character in Xenoblade Chronicles 2.
Yeah. Well, and then you get the crazy anti-feminists, and they only address the crazy feminist arguments. So it's this whole ping pong match between again, the people who don't actually take this subject very seriously, who are shouting
they take it very seriously.
Well, they take it seriously, but not serious enough to actually read up on the peer-reviewed stuff like you're talking about.
Because they can't access it. That costs money.
Yes.
In fairness, I get it. I mean, I don't want to... I'm a big free speech proponent, and I have no problem with anti-feminism existing because there's an anti to everything, and I'm fine with ideas being challenged. I find if you drill down on just sort of the regular Joe Schmo or Jane Schmo who identifies as an anti-feminist, they're actually not fully against all feminism. They're against the stupid stuff. And if you talk to them, you get that. That was one of my, proudest things about the whole Gamergate controversy is I got a bunch of gamers to stop saying, we hate feminism. And they started saying, we hate third wave sex negative feminism. Excellent. Good. This is progress, right? I'm joking, obviously, to a point, but there are for-profit feminists and there are for-profit anti-feminists. And you are never going to budge those types. And I've got both of them that like to try to make me miserable. And I find that the only thing you can really do is just make it clear you got to try to talk to them to give them the benefit of the doubt. But once you try and that does not work, when you come to the determination that they are not talking in good faith, you just have to make it very clear that you have tried, it didn't work, you're not going to continue because this is not a productive conversation. And I mean, I've had situations where feminists will say I'm bad for women and never explain why. They'll paraphrase something I said in a way that was not at all what I said. And then you'll get the anti-feminists who want to try to convince people that the exact quote is, she seems reasonable. And that's why she's more dangerous because she's just as crazy as all the others. And my thought is, if you got a straw man and move the goalpost to make your point, you've got a pretty weak argument. Unfortunately, it does persuade some people because they're inclined to believe that. And There's nothing you can really do about that stuff. It's very difficult and a very slow process to change ingrained attitudes. So, I'm not a big fan of these YouTube debates that, you'll get some social justice activist and a, white nationalist in a thing together. You're just recreating the conditions of the Jerry Springer show, which is
pretty much, huh?
Great for entertainment and great fireworks, and you hope that somebody's going to throw a chair and Geraldo Rivera's nose is going to get broken. It doesn't really do very much to advance the dialogue. It doesn't involve a meaningful conversation. Unfortunately, it's again going back to the whole dork side tactics. The minute anybody tries to do an actual conversation, an actual discussion, a proper symposium, these fringes demand a platform. And they're very loud about it, and they're very aggressive about it. And unfortunately, a lot of universities, a lot of private companies, they cave because they're still subscribing to that idea of first rule of advertising, offend no one. And so they give in, and then the whole thing just becomes a shit show. I mean, one of the biggest academic disappointments to me in Toronto in recent memory was the symposium at, I believe it was at University of Toronto, I could be wrong, where Jordan Peterson debated those other two. I don't remember exactly. One was a non-binary person. It was a woman, but they were discussing scientific fact with no scientists present. They were discussing Canadian law with no expert on Canadian law there. One person was, I believe, a legal ethicist, but that's not the same thing as actually being essentially a constitutional scholar. We call them charter scholars up here because our Constitution is called the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. You can't have a debate on areas of expertise without experts present. And the whole thing wasn't actually traditional sort of Oxford rules debate. Like they've done, the Lausanne School of Engineering does a great debate series that actually adheres to Oxford debate rules. It was more like a political debate where they all just spew their talking points and talked past each other. And I really felt like it was a real missed opportunity to really have people walk away feeling like they learned something. It got a big emotional response. But the problem is when people are too emotionally off balance, they don't engage with the material. They put up all these barriers in their head to try to avoid learning.
Yeah.
And that leads to polarization. And so it's really disappointing when there are those missed opportunities at academic institutions because they're just the end result of cowardice. And yeah, that's a strong statement, but that's one I'm willing to stand by, because if the schools aren't standing up and going, look, if we're going to do this debate, we're going to do it right. And if we don't feel like this is being done right, we're not going to do it. You got to remember that universities are businesses and they're heavily political because of that. Their job is to make money. And people don't realize that. I mean, the big Ivy League schools in the US, they're all private colleges.
Yeah.
Which means they're money-making institutions. And the minute you have that for-profit motive, you're not going to have objectivity because it's all about follow the money. Where are the richest donors? Where are the richest alumni? That's who we're going to pander to. It becomes more like political fundraising than, the structure of, government services, which inherently, you have to stay within budget mostly, but your goal is not to make a profit. It's a very, very important distinction.
Though you do see even the public colleges operate very much like businesses, especially with sports.
Because it's such a major source of not just revenue, but, attracting students. It's amazing how many kids still want to go to party schools.
Oh, yeah.
And I guess it's good to have the party schools because they're known as the party schools, and it can divert those people who, whose parents just want them to have 4 more years of babysitting. You have to get a degree. I think that's one of the most harmful attitudes in the modern age is you have to have a degree.
Yeah.
University is not supposed to be like that. University is supposed to be for people who are requiring specific training for a specific field. It's not necessarily a specific job, but the assumption is that if you're in a psychology program, you want to be a psychologist at some point.
Yeah. Well, and it depends on what you're going into. I mean, there are certain degrees that are very much like you're going to get this degree and then, now you're a teacher, right. Whereas like I got an English degree. So that meant I had nothing,
Oh, that means you can be a technical writer. That's what I found out. I took English literature, and after the first year, I was like, my God, this is a waste.
I know. Yeah.
I liked the material, but they spent a lot of time looking down their nose at the humanities department. But in a lot of ways, a history degree, it's funny because my stepbrother got a history degree. He's a magazine editor. You'd think that's what you get an English degree for. But no.
Well, anything with English or history or philosophy, you just, if that's all you get, then you're kind of, it's luck of the draw for what your career is going to become.
If you're not prepared to commit to the 10-year plan and become an academic, it's a waste of time. It's getting a degree.
Yep.
Right. Especially since a lot of English now is comparative literature anyway, because they're trying to get more diverse content. So you end up reading books that were originally written in Spanish and things like that. That's kind of not the point. But I do really believe that the whole university system needs to be overhauled. They attempted to do that with, these interdisciplinary programs, which is where things like women's studies or gender studies or African American studies or Latin American studies or all that stuff, that's where they fall. As somebody who took that, the problem is when you start pulling from a whole bunch of different disciplines, you do lose an element of academic rigor.
Yeah.
A lot of interdisciplinary courses are heavily sociology based. I took a straight up anthropology course as well and liked it much, much better because I really felt like with anthropology, there's a methodology. There's a particular, the culturally relativistic approach you have to put yourself in to observe. It's much more rigorous. Now, there are some good sociology programs. I have a friend who has a PhD in sociology. He's a researcher now. But, he's actually studying the sex lives of old people, which was not what he intended to get into when he started, I'll assure you. Yeah. But he does have standards and I've learned a lot from him, but, he's sort of the exception because he was very pragmatic with what he did. He didn't want to go into academia, much to his professor's great chagrin, because he was being groomed for that. But yeah, there has to be pass-fail conditions. There have to be standards, or your stuff just ends up like junk, and the standards can't just be, well, what's the opinion of your peers? There has to be certain things you can test. And I've really discovered working on Lady Bits and having that be one of the requirements for anything I tackle, there is a real lack of that when it comes to gender studies. Even the definitions just suck.
Yeah.
And it's just because a lot of them are sort of consensus. It's what can we agree on? And as well as I do, that those sorts of agreements tend to make no one happy.
Yeah, it's very true.
Like the textbook definition of sexism is something like, bigotry on the basis of sex. Prejudice on the basis of sex. Well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
It's a self-referential definition that means nothing.
Yeah.
you've pretty much broken down the part of speech that an ist is. That's all. What does it look like? And that's when you get into the huge mess that we have. And so I, coined the definition that I use for Lady Bits as sexism is ideas or behaviors that perpetuate the dominance of one gender over other genders. Because that's something you can test, right? Does it actually have an impact? If it's just someone being an idiot and doesn't matter, who cares? Is this harmful?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you've got too many instances now in this stuff where people see harm and they equate it to being criminal. And so unless something's a crime, nobody pays attention. And that's why there's this phenomenon of criminalizing speech, that, speech is violence, because people will pay attention to violence instead of going, well, maybe we need to target our actions somewhere more productive. These people who are quite set on policing the way other people talk, ironically enough, instead of recognizing that that's the wrong hill to die on, they just try to make the hill bigger. So they try to equate it with violence. The thing is, I grew up in a pretty rough neighborhood. Educators and people who are trying to intervene in, gang dynamics were desperate to get kids to use their words, to talk things out, to name their feelings, to identify their feelings, to use words as an alternative to violence.
Right.
Speech is not violence. And, this is where you get the complaints that, established feminism has a very white middle, if not upper middle class, shine on it. And that's not helping the vast majority of people who actually need it. It's a difficult problem. And I really think that you can't solve it by everybody just yelling at each other. I think that more good feminist work is being done by people like Nicki Minaj and even Rihanna in her own way, and Oprah Winfrey. I think they are the ones that are actually figuring this stuff out, as opposed to these academics. Academics are very good at telling you what happened after it happened. Academics are not terribly fantastic at actually creating change.
Right. Well, it's not necessarily an academic's role to create change either.
I agree. I agree.
I think it's almost kind of like you look at it as a team effort. Like the academics do a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of providing the research and the synthesis and all the other, but then you need somebody who can communicate that honestly and with their own rigor to a wider audience. I mean, and then that's the problem. Like, you talk about peer-reviewed articles about feminism. Well, yeah, most people aren't going to read the peer reviews, but there needs to be people who do and then convey that. I mean, oftentimes that's what the media is supposed to do, right?
And the media does it very, very badly.
Yeah, oftentimes the media does it very badly, and then we get back into that other conversation, which is just what is going to get the clicks, what is going to get the audience, and it's either outrage or fluff. And so like the whole process there's so many points on that chain of conveying information, digesting information that are broken in smaller or larger ways that it's tricky.
I think it's also, we're sort of in an age where rigor isn't cool.
Yeah.
People kind of feel this. You're not allowed to show your steps. You're not allowed to show your work. You're supposed to sort of show up fully formed and be instantly amazing at things. And no one does that. There are certain people who are intensely gifted at what they do. They still have to practice.
Yeah, it's like posting gameplay footage of a game you're just trying out for the first time, and you're not good at it right away, and people in the comments are like, "You suck at this game." It's like, I just started playing this game. Like, why should I be good at it right now?
I found that's kind of an element of performance, that it's the whole get good thing that a lot of people don't understand. That they say you suck. This is what a lot of people don't understand. gamers don't say you suck trying to be mean. They say you suck at the beginning, but then they'll cheer you on if you get really good too.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, most people don't stick with it long enough to get to that point. I do feel kind of bad for Dean Takahashi over at VentureBeat with the Cuphead thing.
Yeah. That's a
I
hard
do
game.
think I think he was given bad advice by his colleagues. If you're going to show a video of you sucking really hard at a game, you better follow it up with massive quantities of awesome.
Yeah.
Because if all you show is you not being able to perform a basic air dash, people are going to wonder what you're doing reviewing a game. And I admit I don't understand what they were thinking. Dean's a good guy, and that's what's so unfortunate about it is a guy who happens to be a decent dude got hit hard.
Yeah.
But I have to set my my personal like for the guy aside and look at how it was presented. Getting back to that idea of production of news again, it was produced very badly.
Right.
And I've done it where I've played games at first. I mean, games like you can get away with it in games like Dark Souls or Bloodborne or Cuphead or something like that, because everybody gets their ass handed to them at first in those games. It's part of the process. But that is the beginning of the story. And every story, even a news story, needs a beginning, middle, and the end. And so it's an unsatisfying experience for people if they don't see you improve. Gamers love training. We've joked about this. Nerds love training. They want to see you train, and they want to see you get better and come out this fully trained Jedi warrior that is clearly, spent years and years and years mastering your craft. The problem is that there's no time to do that.
That's the problem. I was going to say, it's one thing if you're a YouTuber that plays like a game or two almost exclusively, that you play Dark Souls all the time and you play all the Souls games. And so you're really, or it's another thing if you're someone who plays, maybe 30 or 40 games a year, and you don't master every single one of them. You just don't.
You just don't have the time. One of the nice things about not having to review games on the regular anymore is I actually feel like I can spend some time with a game.
Yeah.
Breath of the Wild was the first game in a really long time I was able to actually sit down with and just explore all the nooks and crannies of the map and go and find all the shrines and everything like that, because I wasn't under a 3-day deadline to slog through 60 hours. The review process is ridiculous.
I won't do it anymore. Like, this is one thing that I've learned is that my reviews are almost never on time because, well, for one thing, the publishers are worse than ever now about getting you the game. You almost never get it. Well, at least I don't. I almost never get a game in time to do a proper review. So, I mean, sometimes you just have to, eventually get to the review. And some games, a lot of them are so long. They're wonderful, like Persona 5. I love it. One of my favorite games last year.
But it's long.
But it's really long. And, on top of that, it's not just that. You also have Assassin's Creed and all these other big games. I admit last year I started playing a lot of Call of Duty for the reason that, well, I decided I wanted to get better at it. And it was very easy to sit down and play in 30 minutes or an hour long chunks. And so I was like, you know what, I'm just going to play this game every night for a few weeks. And, by the end of it, I did get pretty damn good at it, and a lot better than I've been at any Call of Duty game in years. And it was almost like junk food in a way, I guess. But at the same time, it was kind of nice to just be like, you know what, I'm not going to worry about, timeliness or, and so, I think that it's tricky to try to review games the way that games are reviewed right now. And I think that that's something that I guess it's up to each individual writer or publication. But, we got Xenoblade Chronicles 2, Ollie Barter, who reviewed that, got that, I think, several days after it came out. And he just published his review a couple days ago. So he spent a full month with that game. I think that's the way to do it.
There's an example, though. Ollie is the perfect guy to review that game.
Absolutely. We make sure that he did. Yeah.
Lives and works in Japan.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I love
There's
all of them.
too many Japanese games for him to do them all, but
Of
I do
course.
like it when he tackles something that he got a lot of experience in that series or that style of game.
Of course,
Um,
but the games industry has to mature
mhm,
in this regard. The thing is, a lot of people don't know what that looks like because they start their career in games and they either leave it or they end their career in games,
mhm.
right? They don't come from film or book reviews or anything like that. And because they'd know that in those worlds, the film companies actually set up events for you to come in. And
Mhm.
then they give you multiple days, sometimes as long as a month, to write your review.
Of a 2 hour movie.
Because for a 2 hour movie, exactly.
Yeah.
But okay, in fairness, you see 5 movies in a day sometimes.
Yeah.
But the whole idea is they want you to sit with the movie and think about it because they know that if the movie's really good, you are going to have a better opinion of the film after you've chewed on it for a while.
Yeah.
Games reviews are, I have become convinced games reviews are something publishers don't want. They want to be able to sell games on hype and just appeal to that core crowd who loves the franchise and is gonna buy all the games and buy all the DLC and buy the toys and buy the t-shirts. They're trying to get $200 to $300 out of every individual user. It's
Yeah.
completely different. So it actually benefits them to have reviews come out in kind of a scattershot manner in a way that is not especially trustworthy since the review process has been undermined and the reviews that come out are of relatively low quality or late, people are buying games based on hype, and that
Yeah.
benefits publishers because they can tell us what to think.
Well, yeah, and I mean we saw that with Bethesda basically getting rid of their entire like review copy system entirely. And you also see kind of an interesting thing with YouTube where you have some content creators on YouTube who are basically vessels of hype for a publisher. You know,
Oh,
they get
sure.
way early and then they have nothing but amazing things to say about it for the weeks leading up to it. Then you have YouTubers who are incredibly thorough and maybe they come out with their review 6 months later and it's an hour long, very detailed, very intricate look at the game, and that's really awesome. I love those
Those
videos.
those are um those are produced for entertainment though. I mean,
Yes,
those are
absolutely.
done for a core audience who is looking to have their opinion confirmed.
Yeah, or expanded on.
Yeah.
It's certainly not a
Yeah.
consumer based review because of course 6 months later in an hour long video is not what people are really
Yeah,
determining to buy a game.
you're pushing for the Steam sale at that point. But
Yeah,
I mean, one thing we don't have in gaming are professional organizations, the way film, TV, there's a film critics association.
yeah,
Um, and I think that gaming needs it now. Who would run it is fraught with peril.
yes, that's what I
But
was thinking.
if yeah, if there is an association, then all of a sudden you've got a collective bargaining position. All of a sudden the organization can say to Bethesda, we will not review or cover your games if you do not give us adequate access in advance
Right.
to examine your products. I mean, we know why Bethesda doesn't want critical review on games. They're buggy pieces of garbage. That, the Fallout and Skyrim games do phenomenally well because people expect mods.
Yeah.
A game like the original Dishonored was gorgeous. The second game was meh. The
Yeah.
thing that I found funny is I'm sitting there, watching the trailer at E3 because that's all it was. There was no hands-on. Well, there's a reason there was no hands-on. There were even frame rate stutters in the presentation they gave.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here going, was that a stutter? And I saw some of the other coverage of it and nobody mentioned it. They were just all talking about how wonderful and beautiful and you can play
It's
as
so,
Emily Caldwell now.
it's so
That
easy
just
to get swept up in that hype of a new trailer.
and
It's
that's
so
inexcusable
easy.
because there is a Hollywood Press Association gathering every single year. The upfronts are every single year. And they are crazy hype machines.
Yeah.
And somehow film and TV critics don't get swept up the same way that the games press does.
Yeah.
And, I know this is a cliche of you have to be professional. We don't know what that means yet is the problem with the games press. I mean, people like you, I believe, and I'm not blowing smoke up your ass here. There's a reason I keep talking to you. I think that you produce high quality content that is thoughtful. You are actually trying to give people information that they can use. And I find your content interesting. When you write about Star Wars, it's interesting. There'll be at least one moment in an article where I'm like, didn't think about that element before. That's really cool. You don't have to agree or disagree with a point to have it make you think.
That's a good way to say it. You don't have to agree to make. Yeah. If only
and
thought that way.
I like stuff that makes me think. It always drives me crazy when people are like, I don't agree. And that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. They don't elaborate. It's like, okay, that's the beginning of the conversation. I get these comments all the time. I don't agree, but it was a good video. I'm actually interested in the other perspective. I'm interested in why people really don't. What's that?
Yeah. It's so dismissive just to say I don't agree, or some version of that, and without coming up with some counterpoint.
Thumbs up or a thumbs down. I think a lot of people think that if it's criticism, people don't want to hear it. And I'm not like that. If somebody, because these are all highly subjective, things anyway. You liked the Canto Bight sequence in The Last Jedi. I liked the Canto Bight sequence in The Last Jedi. A lot of people didn't.
Yeah. Well, it could have been better. I'll admit that.
Lots of it could have been better. I still thought it couldn't have been yanked out completely the way some people say. But I think what I am more interested in is why someone didn't like it. I don't give a damn whether somebody liked a game or didn't like a game, or liked a movie or didn't like a movie. I am intensely interested in why they had that reaction, because that you don't just learn something about the film. You don't just learn something about this community. You learn something about the person as well.
Yeah.
And
very true.
Yeah, like I love those conversations. I mean, I made some comment about the role of Greek heroes the other day, and somebody I know well enough to kind of go, no, you can't do that to me, said, I don't agree with you on the Greek heroes thing. And I'm like, oh, come on, you can't leave me hanging. You have to tell me why. And he told me it actually turned out we did agree. We were just saying the same thing in different ways.
That happens all the time. It's so true.
And the problem with the way media is consumed online is the like-dislike button, or the upvote or the downvote. Mm-hmm. People can just hit a button instead of actually having to state why they feel a certain way. But I've talked to some people and they say they really don't think anybody's even going to read the comment, never mind, take anything from it. So the commenting is almost a self-soothing behavior.
That makes sense.
And I think that's terrible, that people feel like their opinion doesn't matter. A lot of
people do ignore the comments. And I understand why, too, because sometimes the comments can be really exhausting to read because they can be so filled with, ad hominem and various insults and death threats and things like that. But I really do. And I always have, ever since I started writing online, I always read the comments and I try to respond to as many as I can. It's harder now with Twitter and Facebook and the whole thing together.
You get overwhelmed.
You have to limit how much you engage.
Yeah.
Because I can get stuck in that for too long. But I think that sometimes I've learned a great deal from commenters, because commenters can have, like gamers, like say a gamer that's commenting, they might have vastly more experience with a game franchise than I do, and maybe they'll come at it with, hopefully not with insults and everything, but with like some really good observations, things I missed, or context or history and so I've always really appreciated the commenters and the people that I have engaged with, especially ones that I've been engaging with over the years.
Yeah.
And I've always learned a lot. So I do really appreciate when there is more than just even just more than an I agree. I mean, I'll take an I agree, but
of course.
I want to hear I want to hear reasoning. I guess I do get burnt out when it's something like the Rey is a Mary Sue debate, and you get people writing
it's just a low quality discourse.
It is, and it's the same 5 bullet points over and over again. And it doesn't matter how you counter them; those are just going to get brought up again and again. It starts to feel very unoriginal, like everyone's parroting the same talking points. That I don't like.
My problem is, okay, so what? Every character Lord Byron ever wrote was a Mary Sue.
Yeah.
What's the thing with Mary Sues? Like, first of all, you cannot say for certain whether or not any character is a Mary Sue, because a Mary Sue is a pop culture colloquialism that has no firm definition. It shifts. There's like 3 of them floating around out there. So we can't decide for certain, because it's really not, it's not anything. It's like, lime Diet Coke or raspberry Diet Coke. Who cares? It's not real lime and it's not real raspberry. But then, so what?
Yeah.
Are you saying it's bad writing? Are you saying it made it less enjoyable for you? Are you saying it took you out of the movie? What is your actual issue? Cut to the chase. Why is this important?
Well, it feels deeply nitpicky to me, that whole argument. But now anyone who listens to this, that's all they're going to talk about now is this. So
it actually just happened the last couple weeks, as I was having a go. I was having a go at people about Star Wars, because that was something I just could not take seriously. And sometimes I'm willing, because I am a gamer, and because you may have noticed I'm a tiny bit aggressive, just a little. It's like, all right, let's go. Like, let's go head to head. Let's mix it up. Let's actually fight about this. Let's go. And, at the core of all this stuff is that a lot of the longtime Star Wars fans don't identify with Rey.
Yeah.
For very good reasons. I don't identify with Rey. But they identify very strongly with Kylo Ren. And they don't feel, I think, like Kylo Ren is kind of getting his proper due, because there's so much focus on the girl power aspect of Star Wars. Now, if you ask me, that's because you keep getting male writers writing these scripts who don't know how to write female characters. The reason Kylo Ren is so developed is they know what to put in his head.
Right.
Rey is that girl that these guys had a crush on when they were like 11 and never told her. So they actually don't know her. They make her do all this stuff, but they're observing her from the outside.
Yeah.
They're not in her brain.
They should get the Duffer Brothers to do the next Star Wars.
You know what? They'd be great. They've had a pretty decent track record on Stranger Things, creating different good female characters.
I agree. I think they've done a good job with it.
I think that Max, she's still interesting and she's still conflicted and she's still a little dynamo, but she's a different sort of dynamo than 11 is. Yeah. And they feel like well-rounded characters, and that's coming from the directing, because they're kids. Right. They may be incredibly gifted child actors, but it's not the same. And Winona Ryder's character on that show is just astoundingly good.
Best role she's ever had, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. But it's funny
because there's a really good variety of female characters on that show. And even though like the main characters are the 4 boys, like, and 11, but there's still a lot of different female characters in different stages of life, in different roles, and with different, flaws and different. All the characters in that show I feel are pretty well rounded. And
I felt they didn't quite know what to do with Dustin in season 2, which kind of made me sad. Yeah. He did some kind of things that made no sense, but he's so adorable. And
oh my gosh.
The fact, what's that?
He is so adorable. It's just
so cute. But the fact that they went so dark with that other little boy, but that was the 80s, right? We were allowed to do things like that back then. Oh yeah. I think they probably would say no. Like, that's the thing. You got to get somebody who will say yes to Star Wars, right? I agree with you with The Last Jedi. I like that they took some risks, even though they didn't all work.
Yeah.
I thought that The Force Awakens was fun and it was great visual spectacle. I just found it very safe, and I found Rogue One very safe in its own way too.
Mm-hmm.
Rogue One wasn't a terribly memorable movie.
No. Well, they move too quickly between one thing to the next. This is the problem with all three of the new movies. I think the core problem is that they never anchor themselves in the worlds that they inhabit. They go through so many worlds, literally planets and areas, that there's never that moment where you're like very firmly on Hoth, or you're very firmly on Dagobah or Endor. You know, these long extended set pieces that really like bring you into that world and let the characters be in a place. They're always just go, 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 move, move, move. And that, I think that hits both world building and character development in sort of ways that I wish they would sort of realize they're doing. I don't think they realize they're doing it.
Let's face it, that's not what drives the Star Wars franchise. Yeah. What drives the Star Wars franchise is merchandise development.
Absolutely.
I mean, Star Wars has made, I forget what the statistic is, double or triple the money on merchandise than it has in ticket sales.
Yeah, it's a big number.
You know, you put 7 big set pieces, 7 planets. That means you can do a 7-planet glassware set instead of only a 5-planet glass. And I say this as someone who owns a Star Wars planet glass set. I'm a sucker. But I do agree with you from a filmmaking perspective. I think they're taking that faster, more intense George Lucas direction note a little too literally.
Yeah.
But I think it's also because I think they are trying to desperately avoid what they did in episode 1, which is very, very long scenes talking about, you know, economic trade.
Sure. And that's not the way to go either. You know, I think that the original trilogy struck a balance between with its pacing and its that just has never been struck again. And I certainly prefer the new movies to the prequels because the prequels are garbage.
They're just better acted.
But yeah, well, and the dialogue's better, and they're more entertaining. You know, it's just
they're definitely more. I mean, the thing is, kids love the prequels.
Kids are dumb.
Well, and that's sort of the thing. Like, there are moments where I have trouble judging some of this stuff because I mean, I find elements of Star Wars Rebels kind of derivative. Like, I'll sit down and watch it with a kid and they'll love it. And I'm like, nothing's happening, you know, but I admit I still giggle every time one of the droids goes, Roger, Roger, you know?
Yeah.
But kids love those cartoons and they love Clone Wars and they're just, I think kids look for what they like in something and they're much better at filtering out the stuff they don't like. Whereas part of the enjoyment of us bitter grown-ups is that we feel important when we can put tangible details on an issue we had.
Yeah, totally.
And,
especially as
you know, as long as crapping on something is a way to seem smart, we're not going to be able to effectively connect with these movies. I know when I walked out of The Last Jedi, I'm like, oh my God, Princess Leia used the Force and those racing goats were awesome. And then I started hearing all of the complaints. And I found myself going, yeah, that's true, but. And I had a different perspective on that. And I just wish people would let people enjoy stuff.
Yeah, you know? I was surprised at all the backlash to The Last Jedi because, you know, we all dressed up. You know, we all had our Star Wars costumes on. We went to the Alamo Draft House down in Phoenix where, you know, you order food and drinks. And it was just a great experience because they had, at the theater, they had like stormtroopers and Vader. So we're taking pictures with all these, you know, characters from the movies. And the owner of the theater, like, gave us free food because we had such good costumes. So it was this big experience. It was really fun. When the movie then was also, I thought, you know, it was funny and it was engaging. It was really different and surprising. The whole time I just felt like I had no idea what was going to happen, which is really rare for me in movies. Like, I almost always can sort of see where it's going, you know, like there it goes. But this one I had no idea. Like, right from the bat when he throws the lightsaber over his shoulder, I was like, okay, not what I was expecting here.
Yep.
So I just felt like that whole experience from just getting to the theater to leaving was really nice. And so maybe that embellished my appreciation of the movie to some degree. But then to kind of leave that and see just this huge backlash to it, I really was surprised. I was really surprised at the Force Awakens backlash too, because again, that was a fun experience. It was really cool to be seeing Star Wars again. Yeah, I rolled my eyes at the new Death Star even, but it was like, whatever, it's just a Star Wars movie. But I guess maybe that's the difference. I am an old school fan of Star Wars. Watched it my whole life. I've had the toys my whole life. I consider myself a very passionate fan of Star Wars, but I never once thought to myself, that's not my Luke Skywalker. Because honestly, like, take the character in new and interesting directions. That's what I want from my stories.
Yeah.
I don't want them to fit my headcanon, my own fan fiction. I want to see what interesting things happen with the characters in these stories. And I like that they go a different direction. I liked that Rey's parents were not, Obi-Wan Kenobi and the Force.
I personally loved that as well.
I loved it so much. And I even wrote a piece about how that compares to Game of Thrones, and I won't spoil that.
I read that. I thought that was a great piece. I felt less alone on my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, we've been fed, especially in those of us who like sci-fi and fantasy and these sort of epics. We've been fed this sort of line of like the chosen one and the pure blood and the monarch. You're the long lost son of the king and all that.
Right.
That is so. It's just happened so much. And in so many ways, it's a kind of a negative message. Like, I like the message that, you can be exceptional and important and do great things, even if you are just the daughter of, alcoholics. Right. I think that's a wonderful message in Star Wars in particular.
I think I agree with you. That's what I got from it. I as somebody who didn't come from a ton of economic privilege, I loved that. Like, that was something. It's like, oh, finally something about Rey I can identify with. But I think for a lot of people, the idea of a born hero, there's the born hero and the made hero, the different archetypes. But I think a lot of people feel like they didn't reach their potential, and they justify it to themselves by saying, well, I wasn't born into money, or I didn't have these connections. I never had a chance.
Yeah.
And when they are given a message that it doesn't matter, you can still be awesome, you can still pull yourself up from nothing, they feel bad. Yeah. Because they weren't able to overcome their circumstances. Right. And I mean, this ties into the stuff about Trump as well, too, right? Like, there's a huge portion of people who think that people who are billionaires should be president because they're better than the rest of us. Yeah. And I really think there is, because don't forget, millennials have been raised on all this privilege theory, and they've had the barriers to success like drummed into them. Mm-hmm. I'm afraid they've internalized a message of, don't try, kid, you never have a shot.
Yeah, it's a real danger.
Yeah,
I mean, I think it's the flip side to that coin of like, you can do anything and pull yourself up from your bootstraps no matter what. I think that's dangerous too, because obviously someone who's born with a massive inheritance has a huge leg up over someone who is born, in a big, into poverty, or even into just the lower middle class or whatever. Like, there are definitely advantages you get from where you're born, the luck of your birth. There's the RNG involved in life. Like, there's just the
of course.
fact of life.
I personally feel like I've wasted a lot of time in my life trying to do things the right way, the proper way. And I think that's what, a lot of these guys who dog on the new Star Wars as well. There are rules, and you follow the rules, and you're rewarded for following the rules. Whereas life's not like that. You have to look at the board. It's like a tactical strategy game. You have to look at the board. It's like, okay, there's a lot of different ways I can lose and only a couple ways I can win. Yeah. I need to find the ways I can win. That might not be the most straightforward path. It might not be the nicest or most obedient path. Mm-hmm. You have to, kind of trust your feelings, Star Wars style, and go with what's gonna give you what feels right, as opposed to, well, I need this to get this, and unless I have part A, I can't move on to part B. but I really want part C, but it'll happen somehow because I read Steve Jobs' biography, and if I act like this, I'm going to become Steve Jobs.
7
right?
tips to be an amazingly successful person. Yeah, and lose weight, and no, I know what you mean.
People don't realize you succeed despite your mistakes, not
Yeah.
Steve Jobs going in there and alienating a bunch of Apple employees and yelling at everybody and basically being a jerk. That was a mistake. That same stubbornness, that same inability to listen to what's good for you probably cost him about 20 years of life.
Yeah.
He died a very young man.
Yep. But very successful.
Don't be like Steve.
Well, I liked to see, going back to The Last Jedi, Yoda's little lesson, failure, the best teacher is. I think that's really important. And I think that was one of the most important moments in the movie. And another thing that I feel like people just really didn't catch.
They actively rejected it.
Uh-huh.
It's funny because they take so much solace in the angry Kylo Ren style failure. That's what I hear a lot, that he fails, he's terrible at everything. It's like, that's precisely what I have an issue with. Like, do you notice Kylo Ren's bad at everything?
Yeah.
And he still has everybody calling him supreme leader.
Yeah.
That's not failure.
Right. It's not.
Like, he still moved up because of who his parents are.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I loved Yoda's message. I thought that the moments where, Luke Skywalker talked to R2-D2, Luke Skywalker talks to Yoda again. I was like, oh my God, Mark Hamill just looks so happy to be there.
Yeah, totally. And fun.
They were beautiful. And I loved that moment too. I was like, this is the message we need today.
Mm-hmm.
We need to stop punishing people for failure. And this is very true with games as well. I hear this from publishers a lot, that gamers demand innovation but crucify failure. The two are connected. You gotta break things and mess up and then get it right. Of course, it's that thing we talked about before. You want to do all your mistakes behind closed doors. That doesn't always happen. And I completely agree. Failure is an incredible teacher. Because sometimes then you realize, well, those failures may not have necessarily been failures per se, or they weren't necessarily your failures.
Or they prevented a larger failure from happening. So the whole burn it down. I always, whenever I hear people say they want to burn everything down, it kind of ties into this idea of failure. It's like, I think so. There's always forest fires around here, and part of the problem is that for a long time, the fire service would put out any small forest fire that happened,
right? And
so slowly the forest changed from being one that regularly burned and was fairly sparse to being overgrown and just extremely dangerous. So now when a fire happens, it's huge. And it does burn everything down. I mean, it's and so they're constantly trying to fix this. And it's partly because, that this is sort of allegorical or whatever, but the small fires that you have, they keep it from becoming a much bigger fire. And I think that's just true to a lot of things in life and how you live your life. Like, you have to be able to screw up. You have to be able to have failure so that you don't just have a total fucking mental breakdown and, to completely collapse. And the same thing with, and you could definitely just apply this to just about anything. The economy. Look at the big crash, you got to let things fail in the economy so that the successful things can thrive. And you can't have it ever get to a point where if it does burn down, it literally all burns down.
Well, that's what's so funny about gaming, that everybody's terrified of another quote unquote Atari crash, right? The Atari crash was so catastrophic, it lasted exactly 2 years. That's it.
Yeah.
That's not a catastrophic failure. That's a burp.
Yeah.
And they all freak out because Atari shock and the Atari crash has become such legend in gaming that everybody's like, we can't go back there. We can't go back there. We can't go back there. Like, that happened in 83. The NES came out in 85.
Yeah.
That's hardly, ask all the people that have been out of work for 5-6 years, for all the lost decade survivors in Japan. 2 years ain't nothing. And, you know, I think that it is really, I think it's good that we don't have a bazillion systems anymore. I think we should limit. I think we're actually getting a few too many when you look into all these peripherals they keep trying to puke out. It's too expensive already. But I think we've got a nice sort of structure of kind of the three major console companies plus PC.
Yeah, no, I think so too. And then, you know, and I think that I don't think that we need anything really new for a while. That, speaking of Atari, it's so funny that they're announcing like a new console, which is just going to be like an Android system, I think. But
yeah,
you remember the Ouya?
What's that?
The Ouya?
Yeah, it's funny because I called that one.
Yeah, so did
I.
I remember.
Yeah,
it was.
You're going to change the world with a console that everybody who wants one already bought one.
It was so silly.
That was a Kickstarter that was so well publicized. I mean, that was one of the frustrating things with the Lady Bits Kickstarters. It kept getting called, we don't do Kickstarter campaigns. It's like, I read your coverage on the Ouya while it was still in Kickstarter. I mean, God, they all covered Anita Sarkeesian's Kickstarter while it was active. That's not why they're not covering it. They need a scandal. Like, just please be honest with me. But the Ouya, I got the idea of those Android systems. I think what's going to happen is eventually Android games are going to be playable directly on smart TVs. That's going to be the ultimate. It's just going to be a little app like your iPhone. Yeah. I don't think it's going to be a living room box because, one, as somebody who does love my 4K technology, when you wall mount a TV, hooking a whole bunch of stuff up to it becomes messy.
Oh, yeah.
But also, people don't want their living rooms cluttered with crap. They want everything sort of in one place. They want it contained. You know, we don't even have external hardware for movies anymore. It's all streaming. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I think that's part of the problem. It was an aesthetic issue. But what also happened with the Ouya is it was the same thing that happened with VR. Once we got the Ouya, we got the Steam boxes and we got the Alienware Android boxes and we got all these different choices and people just suffered choice paralysis. If it had just been the Ouya and maybe the Steam machine, I think it would have worked. The problem is the market got flooded with choice the same way, you know, VR, it was 4 or 5 different systems all at once?
Yeah.
People just kind of
and they were expensive and well, and VR is still so incredible. We could go on about VR, I'm sure. So in terms of just going back to Lady Bits here, what are your plans for 2018?
Finish the series. That's really important.
Yeah.
I don't want to be like some other people who have a series go on and on and on forever and we don't know what's going on. Maybe that's old school producer in me, but I always sort of feel like first and foremost, finish your work, finish what you've committed to. There's a lot still coming down the pipeline. I mean, the female game development show is the one I'm currently working on. Like, how does a game development company benefit by having women on the team? That's the one I'm working on right now. And each show is sort of its unique challenge because I don't just have the topic, I have sort of the greater cultural topic. And that one, the topic I'm tackling there is basically the history of patriarchy and how it actually works. That's a lot. Right now, I have a 10,000 word script that I have to cut down to 4,000 words. Yikes. But you know, there's the 80s retrospective, the 90s retrospective, those sort of more historical ones that are going to take much different formats just because there's no real debate there. I just want people to recognize that women have always been in this industry. I mean, that was one of the things that drew me to it when I was playing those old, King's Quest games on, a monochrome screen on a Tandy 1000 and Roberta Williams' name popped up. I'm like, oh, cool. Jane Jensen and Lorianne Cole and Donna Bailey and so many others. We were still the minority in gaming, but we were there. And I just kind of want people to realize that women are not newcomers to video games. We have always been here. We have always cared. We've always been opinions. We're informed. We're gamers, just because we're a smaller contingent doesn't mean we're all newcomers that, first picked up a game controller with the PlayStation 3. The damsel in distress episode is obviously going to be a unique challenge because it's going to directly compare side by side with some of the stuff Feminist Frequency did, and tone is going to be super important on that. And then once the series is done and I do all the swag fulfillment, which is not my favorite thing in the world, but you got to do it. Then I have to go back to the community and see what they want, because a big strength of this show has been those feedback sessions, has been the direct communication with the backers who have been very, very open and have had some really great ideas. And whether we kind of feel like, okay, this has been done, let's move on to something else, whether we just want to continue for a straight up second season, or whether we want to kind of broaden it to do sort of more general gender stuff. So, bring in some men's issues as well and things like that, which is going to kind of happen a little bit anyway, but we'll see. It all depends on what the community says. And obviously building that community is also something, because it's this thing that's great about Patreon and great about the whole crowdfunding model is you can easily figure out who cares enough to listen to by whether or not they're willing to put down money on something kind of sight unseen. And so, people can sign up on Patreon, or I don't know if we'll do another Kickstarter campaign. Those things are jumping out of a plane without a net. But, just sort of build that community. So I continue to get that really incredible, invested, high quality feedback that allows me to continue to create products that people care about, that people feel invested in. And that's been the really cool thing, is that people feel like they're being challenged, but they also feel like they put their money in a good place. And that's sort of what I want to continue to do. I've had some discussions about documentaries and doing interview series and all that. And obviously that requires infrastructure. So that's a huge, like, long-term stage 2, trying to do more, I guess, data collection as opposed to just straight up analysis. That would be really fun to be able to go out there and, sit down with some of these creators who either, are female creators or created some great female characters, to be able to run large scale surveys would be awesome. But obviously now we're talking about grant money territory, and I suck at writing grants. So we'll see about that. But I really think collecting a body of useful information. Quantric Foundry is doing some great stuff in that regard. But also, just creating those tools, talking more about performative gaze. In episode 3, I talked about performative gamer gaze, because we really do need those video game specific analytical tools, and we don't have them yet. And I'm really, really bullish on developing more stuff like that, because whenever, Clint Hawking comes up with something like ludonarrative dissonance, okay, now we have something we can examine. Now we have a common language. Now we're not talking, in terms of like Mary Sue's with messy definitions. We actually have things we can test. And we're not there yet together, gaming wise. So if I can be a part of that, I'm very happy. That's what I'm really super nerdy wonkish excited about.
Awesome. I like it.
Sweet.
Well, I think we'll wrap it up. I'll put links to Liana's work in the description of this podcast.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming and talking with me for a couple hours.
No problem. This was fun.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure.
I'm sure we'll get bombarded about the Star Wars stuff, but that's all right.
Well, if they make it that far into it, I figure they're probably going to be invested enough to have a good conversation with us about it. So
it's audio only. People are listening in their cars. Hopefully it doesn't cause any accidents because people are angry and just like drive off the road.
yeah. I mean, get angry, but stay on the road, for God's sakes. All right. Well, best of luck with everything. And,
thanks.
Lady Bits, Liana K or Liana Kersner, however you want to refer to her as. And peace.